My host dad comes down to turn off the light and sees me on the computer. Doesn't say anything at all and retreats back upstairs. So I'm, for a minute, my heart's pounding like, oh my gosh, they saw this. But then I was like, well, they actually didn't mention the internet in any of their problems. So maybe not. Anyway, I go away for the weekend and come back Sunday night. The door's locked. They're not there.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Life Exchange Stories of Understanding. I'm your host, Kelsey Ross, and today we are joined by a wonderful guest. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, Kelsey. My name is Matt Burke. I'm a YFU alum from 1997-98. I grew up in Boston, and now I live in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., where I am a freelance writer and business development consultant. So pleasure to be here.
Pleasure is absolutely all mine. I'm so happy that you're here and talking to me about your story. I'm really excited to have this moment to get to know you a bit more and hear more about your experience.
Mm-hmm. Lots to talk about.
Yes. To begin with, where did this idea of studying abroad come from?
Honestly, I got the first idea of studying abroad when I watched the movie Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown when I was about 6. And it's a movie in which Charlie Brown and a few of his entourage, Linus, Peppermint Patty, and Marcy, I think, go to France. And I remember seeing that on TV and I was like, I want to do that. I had no idea what it was. All I knew is that they had this idea that in the movie they go to France and attend school. And yes, there are plot points that are completely unrealistic and their host locks them out in the rain and kind of vaguely lobs threats about them. But, you know, I didn't care about that when I was 6. It was this idea of like, I want to go abroad and I want to study in school. So it germinated from a really, really young age.
Very pinpoint laser focus. Who cares if they lob threats at me? We are going somewhere, darn it.
Yeah.
I love that. I haven't seen that Charlie Brown movie yet, so I'm going to have to take a look and watch that. That sounds adorable. And so this Charlie Brown cartoon inspired you, and obviously you couldn't go when you were 6. So you had to wait a little bit. So how did you go about finding somewhere to study abroad? And like, how did you go about figuring out who you wanted to go with?
Sure. So my high school had a exchange program with a gymnasium with a German high school in Paderborn, a city in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. And so when I was a freshman, we had a guest from that program come stay with us in March for about 3 weeks. And then we went back for about 2 weeks in August. And I just fell in love with Germany. I had been taking it for 2 years in 8th grade and 9th grade. And I just knew I needed more of it. I was just bowled over by how much I was discovering, how much I was learning, even though I was not doing great on the language, but that's its own ball of wax. I knew I needed more of it. And so as it happened, someone from my school had done the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange before. And so I was like, I thought, yes, I have to do that. Like, I want to go to a place like Paderborn for a year. And I applied and I got it. And as part of that, when I was accepted at the time, they just distributed the participants among the organizations, and YFU was mine.
Okay. From my understanding, that's still how it works. Is you'll apply. If you receive the scholarship, then they distribute amongst the exchange organizations. But to kind of backtrack a little bit, for those of our audience members who may not know what you're talking about, what's the Congress Bundestag scholarship?
Sure. The Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange, now it's referred to by its acronym as CBYX, though in my day, I find myself saying that a lot. In my day, we didn't refer to it like that. But it's an exchange program between the U.S. and German governments whereby about 300 of American students high school students go and study in Germany, and 300 Germans come and study here. And it was started in 1983 to build up the next generation of transatlantic envoys and to reaffirm the friendship between the United States and what was then West Germany. And it is still going strong today. So
awesome. That is awesome. And it's got to feel like such a big honor to receive that scholarship. And I'm curious how it's the process of applying and receiving that scholarship has changed from when you had it in 1997 to now. From the details that you recall, what was that process like for you?
It was essays talking about, why I wanted to do it, why I was a good candidate. I know that I had some recommendations to do it. And I remember I had an interview. It was conducted at MIT, but there was a one-on-one interview. And then there was a group session where the panelists would effectively observe all of us interacting over some situation. I don't remember what it was, but it was, how you interact in a group when there's a conflict and all that.
Sounds intense. That's exciting all at the same time too. And at MIT, that prestige alone would be like, have me shaking in my boots. So, for applicants who may be going into the application round and maybe going into those interviews and doing that scenario, do you have any advice for them on how to handle those nerves and how to let the best parts of you shine to hopefully boost your chances of getting it?
Be calm and be yourself.
Yeah.
It's not really worth it to try and pretend and be somebody else or try and guess what they want. I've found through interviewing for really anything, like if you're calm, if you're prepared, if you show maturity, then you're really putting your best foot forward. And it's not just the one, like you're not trying to put on an act and try and be someone else or what you think is the target, because ultimately they're looking for you and they're looking for people who can be themselves, because as I'm sure we'll talk about, being yourself is a really big part of exchange, and learning who you are is a big part of exchange. And you can't sort of go in pretending or thinking that something else is warranted or is wanted.
Absolutely. It's cheesy to say, but there's no better you than you.
Mm-hmm. Everybody else is taken.
Exactly. Perfect. So, and you had briefly mentioned a moment ago, you had a German exchange student stay with you for a little while before you went to Germany. Do you feel that having him living with you and your family and being host to him, did it prepare you at all for what it could be like for you as an exchange student living with a host family?
My adventures with my host families are long and involved.
Okay.
So, it showed me the value of, intercultural exchange in a very small format. Like the way I described the 2-week exchange versus the year exchange is that the 2-week exchange was really the movie trailer version, where you get all the highlights really packed close together and then it's done. Whereas the year is just filled with so much detail and downtime and gaps between the really big stuff that it's a different experience. Now, that said, from having him in our house, we did learn how to communicate, particularly when one of us didn't know a word or anything, or really like learn what someone wanted to learn about Boston or learn about our family. I know things that we take for granted were largely new.
All right. And so then jumping forward again in time, sorry, we're going all over the timeline. Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're just going to keep popping in and out of timelines here. So, you get through the application process, and then the moment comes where you find out that you won this scholarship. What do you remember about that time and how those feelings that you had?
It was a rush. I remember in those days, we got it as a letter, like a physical letter that was delivered through the mailbox. And I think it was around the end of February. And I remember being completely shocked. I thought that I put a good foot forward during the interviews and in the essays, but still this idea of being picked, I hadn't really reckoned with actually getting it.
Yeah.
And so when I got it, I was elated. And I remember I told my parents, and when they came home, and my mother was absolutely stunned. And it was, it was difficult for her, particularly to let me go for a year. She had always been very much encouraging of my independence, and letting me go around Boston, with my cousin or even by myself. But it had been, that to her was a real shock.
Yeah. Was she ultimately supportive of the decision then? And how did your father feel about this?
They both were very supportive of it. They both had a way with her. They both have a way with words. My mother has since passed. My dad's still alive, but my dad's a professional writer and has this very, very good way with communicating, right? And my mother also, she would write me letters, both when I was abroad, but also when I went to Paderborn the first time, about, how difficult it is to let your child go, but really we're so impressed with the person you have become and so impressed with what you're doing, even if it's tough for us or as parents, how supportive they were of me. And I appreciate that. And, particularly now being a parent myself, it's realized that it's very hard to do for parents. And my daughter is not of the age yet where she would want to go, though she is of the age where she would watch Bon Voyage Charlie Brown. And I realized that it's much harder. So I appreciate my parents for being who they were and for encouraging that, even though it was hard for them.
Yeah. And with you being a parent yourself and having more of that parental point of view now, speaking as also somebody who has studied abroad and been an exchange student, what would you say to parents who are in the process of considering letting their child go abroad and grappling with all of these really hard emotions and wanting to keep their child safe, but also wanting them to be independent?
For one, I would say lean into the fact that it is very difficult. Like, it is a very difficult decision, and don't think it isn't, right? Because it's going to be very hard no matter what. And I have not yet sent my child abroad. I don't even know if she would eventually want to do that. But I mean, I can see why that it is very hard. And I didn't appreciate that as a teen.
Yeah.
At the same time, I would also say that studying abroad, particularly as a teenager, is an investment. Like, it is investment in both the immediate sense of like becoming a better candidate for college, becoming bilingual if you're not bilingual, or trilingual even, and the maturity level that one gains from living abroad and living independently is just so incomparable, I think, because you're put as a person, as a teen studying abroad, you're put in these situations which you don't usually have a parallel back home, or if they do, they're very, very different. And so learning to navigate those is just a level of maturity, and learning to understand the world with grace in a way that the world doesn't do, or in a way that is difficult to do at home. I think that for a parent, it is difficult, but it's also a very wise investment.
I asked the question quite a bit to other study abroad students, but I haven't had one yet who is a parent themselves answer that question. So I really think that your insight and your advice on that is going to be incredibly valuable to a parent who is in that situation. And I really appreciate your insights. So then, yeah, you have your parent support, even though they're a little fearful, of course, and understandably so. You got the scholarship, and then you're preparing to go abroad. And so what did that preparation process look like for you?
Well, it happened in waves, right? So, I was accepted in February. I think I learned I was going to go with YFU in March, probably early March. And then from there, it was just like the paperwork came first. And then, I don't remember if it was essays, but what do you want in a host family? What do you want out of your exchange? Like, give all the information that they will use to place you. Then there's the orientation. I know it's different now. Our pre-departure orientation was the first week of May, and it was regional. So it's not the national one that they do now. Yeah. So we had it earlier, and there I met some interesting YFU friends, including one who became my closest friend. And that's really the point when it started to diverge, because from there till departure date was about 2 months. And all of a sudden I could see that life for everyone else was going to proceed here, whereas mine would effectively end or be put on pause here as of July 1st, I think it was. And so, like, family would plan vacation that I wasn't going to be part of. My classmates were jostling for AP classes for junior year that I wasn't doing. And so all of a sudden I saw sort of one life kind of fading to or one life pausing and the other one sort of coming up. And there was just a lot of unknowns in that life. Like, I knew the broad contours of it. I eventually learned where my host family was going to be, but there was a lot of unknowns. And I think I just had to trust that it was going to be okay. And of course I was super excited about it. So I was eager and ready to go. The waves of goodbyes and the waves of sort of pausing parts of my life were something that I hadn't dealt with before.
I haven't really heard it articulated like that before, where there is all this excitement because you're about to begin this new adventure for your life, but also in a way it sounds like grieving the things that you're going to be leaving behind. It's interesting. So, I mean, does having that excitement of what's to come help with that grief at all? Or how do you grapple with that?
So having the excitement of what's to come, helped. Getting in touch with my host family was also a really big thing. And also in those days, they did the host families differently, which we can get to. But getting in touch with them was really, really a relief. And then from there, I also had the friends I made at orientation. So I had some faces that I was looking forward to seeing again. And as it happened too, one of my high school classmates was also received the scholarship. So she and I, we hadn't been really tight before, but we became pretty close during the whole process because we had this thing between the two of us that nobody else did. So, like, oh, where's your host family going to be? Or, our respected parents sat us down together to really go over logistics and go over, the emotional gamut with our previous class, or not classmate, but the girl who had done it previously from our high school, about like, here's what it's going to be. Here's how to handle both the logistics with being abroad, but also the logistics with school. And then, afterwards when you apply to college, because that had to be on a really truncated frame. So we had lined up a lot of those details before we left, which was really helpful.
I hear from a lot of students that they are the only person in their school, or maybe even their entire family or town, who has ever studied abroad. It's a unique experience hearing that you had not only somebody going with you, but somebody ahead of you to give that bit of a shoulder to lean on, and somebody who understands what you're going through. I would say really lucky in that regard.
I was extremely fortunate, though. I remember specifically the day after we got our families, and I walked into class, our German classroom, and she was showing our teacher where she was placed, and she was pointing to the very top, to Sylt, an island which hangs over the Danish border. Mine was literally way down south on the border with Austria. They could not have placed us farther apart and still kept us in the country. So it was like, well, I'll see you when I see you. But,
wow.
it was just very amusing.
Yeah.
I don't think it was on purpose. But,
yeah. No, I can't imagine that would be on purpose. Although that would be a little ironically cruel if it was. But, so you would briefly mention that the host family process is a little different now, and it was a little different for you. So what did you mean? What do you mean by that?
Sure. So in those days, the language courses ran for the first month, which they still do, but there was about, 25 or 30 of them all around Germany as opposed to one. So what they did was they split us up into these small groups of 10 or so, depending on language knowledge and host family availability, et cetera, in all of these different places around Germany. And there was a trial period through which the student and family could trial working together, or living together rather. And if they both wanted to continue, they could continue. If one of them wanted out, then YFU would replace the student. So YFU Germany did this, I would say, Herculean task of once 2 weeks in, they just replaced everyone who wanted to be replaced all around Germany. So yeah, so instead of congregating around the 30 areas, they placed them all around the country. And by coincidence, or by just the fact that the host families in Passau had students before or were willing to do it, it's like I think four or five of us were placed around that area, but the rest were scattered.
Wholeheartedly agree with that. Herculean task. That is intense.
Well, they faded it out years later, a couple of years later.
I could understand why. That is very, very intense work, but I give them credit for doing it as long as they did. Wow. So did you end up staying with the host family that you were with after that trial period, or were you placed with somebody else?
Well, I did, yes. I mean, so the first few weeks went great. And, I ended up having multiple host families, but it was not due to that scenario. I lived with them for another 4 months, and for the first few weeks, it had gone great. And then, it went south after that.
Yeah. You said you were placed in the south of Germany, and there were a few other students around you. About what was the area that you were in?
It is definitely beautiful. The city is Passau, Passau. It is where the Danube flows into Austria. And it's where the Inn River, the Danube, and the Ilz, which is a tiny river from the Bavarian forest, where they all conjoin at the same spot. And then the united Danube flows into Austria. It is a Baroque city and of bright pastels and bright colors and cobblestones, and it is absolutely stunning. It just doesn't look very German. Like when you think stereotypical German with the with the timber framing and all that, it is not that. But it is a stunning, stunning city. It's about 2 hours east of Munich. There's a direct train to Munich, and it was great. So lovely, lovely place. My first host family actually was so close to Austria that we were surrounded on 3 sides. Like the neighborhood, like you could go down the hill from the house to the border. You could go back behind us, up the street to the border, or through the fields the other way, all like within 300 yards. It was really wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess you maybe spent some time in Austria while you were on exchange as well.
I did. Yes, of course.
Nice.
Kind of can't avoid it.
Awesome. Yeah, especially if you're just hopping over the backyard to hop over into Austria, pretty much. Yeah. So, but we touched a little bit on the fact that the first few weeks with your host family went quite well and everything was great, but things started to take a turn. What ended up happening?
All of the little cliches that they tell you not to do built up and up and up and up and up and up and up until they became unmanageable is the short of it. Right. Gotcha. So I think that from my own part, I was calling home too much. In those days, they advised us to call home once a month. Now I think it's a little bit more frequent than that. But I was doing it, every couple of days. And in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense that I was doing it to fill the downtime. I had gone from a life in Boston that was very full and had a lot of friends. I had a lot of extracurriculars. In school, I had a lot to do. Whereas all of a sudden, I just didn't have that. And so I, mostly at night, like I would call home just to say hi and just to fill time. And I wasn't doing it because I was homesick or because I was pining for people or anything. It was just, calling to check in. Yeah. And, they had said some things to me that were sort of either backhanded or not direct. Like had they come to me and said, this is a real concern and we really want to work with you to solve this, I think I would have been a lot more receptive. But it was more like, no, the rule says once a month, you will not do it. And that's that. And, I also, look, I'm an introvert. So after 4 hours or 5 hours, however long it was of school, 4.5 hours of school in the morning, and of just like German being spoken sort of at you and trying to take it all in, I would just go home and want to go to bed. So we would come home and, of course, in Germany, the big meal of the day is lunch. So my host family would come home and have this lively conversation. And I would just be sitting there strung out, like not ready to do it. And they took it. And I see why they did in hindsight, but they took it as disinterest. Like, you're just here to travel. You're just here to be, to be in Germany, to be on vacation. And, escalated to the point where around late October, because it was right before fall break, they sat me down for a good 45 minutes and told me everything they didn't like about me and wrote it all out too. So I had a manifesto of everything they didn't, of all of my faults. One of the things that I sort of internalized on a lot of things is that rules are rules, right? Like, the rule says don't call home. I knew I was transgressing a rule, and that requires, punishment. Like, that's not a gray area of whatever. And so, yeah, I reformed for a little bit, but ultimately there was going to be something that lit the powder keg and made it untenable. But that happened a month later, but that was how it ended.
That is heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. It's one thing to hear it from somebody like that, just everything they're not a fan of you about, but then to have it written out for you to replay and reread over and over and over again. I mean, there'd be plenty of people who wouldn't be able to come back from that. So how did you process that? How did you handle that?
It took a lot of reflection.
Yeah.
Well, one is that the changes that they prescribed, I could do, right? Like, was able to curb my contact with home or to constrain it to letters. I started getting more involved in the extracurriculars I was involved in increased. I happened to be doing more just by coincidence of the calendar. I was more active during the day or at lunchtime and like, hi, how was your day today? My day was great. We're doing this. But it was hard for me what was really difficult was that my host family encouraged me to be very independent. Like, they told me on the first day, yeah, if you want to travel wherever, as long as it's okay with YFU, you can do it. Like, you don't even have to be here for Christmas. They literally offered that. I didn't ask. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. They're letting me travel to wherever I want. And I just hadn't I hadn't reckoned with the sort of two competing thoughts of I am purely independent. Mm-hmm. And yet when I'm at home, I have to be exactly the person that they want, because the model that they were looking at was one, the rule book, right? Because YFU had specific guidelines that both my family and I interpreted as hard and fast rules not to be broken. Mm-hmm. And a friend of theirs had a student the year before, and he was, as I understood it, basically the perfect student. So whether they intended to or not, I always felt that I was being compared to someone. And that's an adventure for a teenager.
I cannot imagine going through that amount of emotional turmoil. Even as an adult, that would be just earth-shattering in so many ways. Were your parents aware of this big emotional situation that had happened?
No, they weren't. Because one rule I did adhere to was not to burden anyone at home with problems that they couldn't solve. And so I was thinking, no, I'm independent. I'm going to solve this. I don't want them worrying more than they already are. And, so when I eventually had to change, I had to call my dad and basically tell him out of the blue that all of this stuff I haven't been telling you has been going on, actually has been. And I'm changing, by the way. Yeah. So that is what it is.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's intense. And so about how long after this big blowout and this really cruel treatment of you, in my opinion, how long after that were you placed with another family?
So I was still living with that family for about a month, and things honestly were great.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a happy detente. I was getting what I wanted. They were getting what they wanted. It was all great. The night of Thanksgiving, which of course in Germany is just Thursday, I ended up calling. I had a pre-scheduled call with my family, and this shows you how dated this was. But all of my family who was gathered for Thanksgiving was like, well, why haven't you been checking your email? What's going on? And I was like, oh, it's not really a thing here yet, because it was Germany lagged a little bit behind. And so I was like, I don't know. But enough people had been saying that they were emailing me that I thought I should just check and tell them no and like, hey. So the next night, Friday night, I went to bed somewhat early because on Saturday morning, I was going with a group of YFU students to Nuremberg for their famous Christmas market. And I remember specifically, my room was in the basement and there was a patio light on outside it. And I remember thinking about this for like a minute, being like, I really should turn that out. I really should turn it out. No. My host brother was out, and if he comes back late and he's drunk or otherwise indisposed, then he could slip. And I don't want to do that. I'm going back and forth. And I was like, just leave it on. Like, whatever. Anyway, fast forward maybe an hour or not even 45 minutes. And my host dad comes, and I fired up the laptop to just send an email being like, I'm not doing this. Like, you know how to reach me. My host dad comes down to turn off the light and sees me on the computer. Doesn't say anything at all, and retreats back upstairs. So I'm, for a minute, my heart's pounding like, oh my gosh, they saw this. But then I was like, well, they actually didn't mention the internet in any of their problems. So maybe not. Anyway, I go away for the weekend and come back Sunday night. The door's locked. They're not there.
So then what?
Well, then what? Oh, also it was raining really, really hard. So then what happened is I went down to my advisor's house to hang out for a little bit, just to see where just to sort of be inside. And then a couple hours later, I came back. They lit into me. And 2 days later, they told me, this isn't going to work. YFU will come get you. And they did. And I lived with the woman who ran the local coordinators, lovely, lovely family, for a few days. And then they found me a new family and went from there. So, yeah.
I can't understand what would be going on in that host family's head to just, one, it's not only is the fact that you are in a whole new country, a whole new culture, not really knowing them as people, not only the fact are you a child, but to be cruel to another human being like that, to another human being on that level. I can't understand that.
I've considered it part of my narrative for now 28 years, and I hadn't given it much thought until the last few. And I was like, no, you don't do that ever.
No.
If you want to convey that you're mad, there's 100 different ways you can convey you're mad, including just leave a note that says, we have to talk. That conveys it perfectly well.
Yeah.
But in the moment, I thought I made the mistake. And look, like, to get on the internet without permission was something that they would have looked at. Like, I should have known that in the moment and should have asked permission, but the punishment didn't fit the crime. But in this black and white world of rules that I saw, I had committed the wrong, and the wrong deserved the punishment. Whatever the punishment was, now whether they went overboard or whatever, but that was that. But on the way out, I ripped up that letter and piled it on the desk. So I don't still have it.
Okay, good. I was hoping that wasn't still in your possession, because
No.
I would hope that thing was burned in a fiery blaze. But where was your advisor when all of this was kicking off? Were they helpful at all?
My advisor was a wonderful, wonderful person. She's a wonderful, wonderful friend.
Yeah.
Her mentality was, that they needed to, that this was between me and them, and that she wasn't going to get in the middle of it. She could advise me on how to handle it, but not get in the middle and solve it. And I see that, and in the following days when I was really down, she was very helpful. And for the entire year was very helpful. Just in this one moment, just believe it was between me and the family. And it was, but it was a lot of learning and a lot of growing up, and that's what I gained.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. I mean, is there any sort of positive lessons or things that you feel came out of this really sad situation?
The positive is that it didn't have to get there. It was just a bunch of small things that could have been nipped in the bud in the moment, and that weren't. And so nipping those individual things in the bud would have just stopped all of this from happening. And when we first, were living together for the first 2 weeks, it was fantastic. And, my host sister would take me out with her friends they were all around my age. So, we would have great times together. And I always thought we could get back to that. But it just, after a while, the invitation stopped coming. I wasn't in a position where I wanted to ask why. And so, like, that, of course, begets more time away from the family. And so I was like, okay, well, if you're not going to engage with me, I'm just going to do my own thing. And so I'm going to go travel and be away. And you've said you don't have a problem with that. So, I didn't tell them that, but that's how I thought in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I truly hope nobody has to go through something similar. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through this. But you were talking about if things had been nipped in the bud earlier, then this could have been avoided. So how would you suggest that a student or a host family nip these things in the bud, and how would they go about doing that?
Communicate. And I don't say that lightly, and set up a communications regimen that works for both the student and the family, so that criticisms are not seen as points that it's not an accusation. It's not saying you're doing something wrong. It's like, oh, this is the way things are done here, or, oh, I noticed this. Is there a way we could work together to solve this problem? Not just, you are doing wrong, and this is the rule, and you are transgressing the rule, and don't transgress. The solution to the problem is you not transgressing the rule. It's like, right, but the behavior comes from somewhere, and understanding why, and understanding like, is the behavior a call for help? Because now, years later, I understand it as a call for help. Like, I had a vibrant community of friends back at home and family back at home.
Yeah.
Whereas my friends in Germany were all fantastic. Just they were scattered, right? Like, some were in Passau, some were in the suburbs of Passau, some were farther away in Germany. But it's not the same as having your immediate circle of friends around you all the time. And that's very hard too. And I think my own, for a student going into that situation, well, and for host parents too, I would say that, like, your family dynamics, you don't necessarily see them when you're in them all the time. And so to have, when I went in thinking that I was just going to be a member of the host family the way that I was a member of my natural family. And my natural family had a lot of love, a lot of mutual respect, a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just a lot of happy coexistence, right? Yeah. And so I thought that I was going to go into the family and that was going to be the default, that I was automatically going to have that, but I didn't. And I didn't take the time to build it up and invest in it. And, that I understand it now, years later, that I should have actually spent more time doing that. rather than just like being off by myself,
Yeah.
But that's something you learn from doing it.
Yeah. Hindsight is 2020, fortunately and unfortunately. So it's kind of sounds to me like after coming out of this scenario, I mean, let's not mince words. What they did was absolutely horrendously cruel. But it sounds like there was also, after some time passed, a little bit of understanding on your end that maybe things could have been handled a little differently for you. And maybe just been a better communicator and trying to make more of an effort with your family at that time. Let's move on to hopefully, we went down the valley of the wave and then hopefully we're cresting back up. So then you got placed into another host family.
I did. And I will tell you that the wave doesn't come back up right away. So I was placed in a second family that was in a suburb of Paso. So about 12 to 15 kilometers away. So not far at all. And that was helpful to me because I was able to keep most of my social life, right? Like I had a baseball team. Yes, there's a subculture of German baseball, but I had that in Passau and that meant a lot to me. I was able to stay close to a lot of my friends. I was able to still, stay within train distance of Munich, and I had a friend in the Munich area. So I was able to keep a lot of that, and that really helped. The family itself, it started off well, but there were some signs that it wasn't going to end well right away that I think at the time I kind of told myself not to ignore that, or I told myself to ignore that. The family was chosen because they had had a student the year before, but since then there had been developments in the family. One of the parents had since moved out, and it just was not the right situation. I'll leave it that it's just like the situation in the house wasn't as tenable as it had been the year before. And the host mom, she tried her best to keep her two kids kind of in line, but when she was doing it on her own, it was just very difficult. And I think she had an expectation that I, who had just turned 17, was going to be a really close friend of her 12-year-old. And he was an immature 12. And so that was really hard to wrap my head around. And so I did what I did best, right? Which was hang out with my friends and sort of I'm just going to be away from this. I'm just not going to be here. And so, of course, that built tension, right? And so that eventually just wasn't tenable. And school teacher said, hey, if she gives you any problems, come and live with us. And 2 days later, my bags were packed.
Okay.
And then it was rainbows and puppies and everything perfect. And, then it was like, oh, now I get it. It was, it was magic. And we can talk about that, but that was when it started to go not only back up, but accelerate back up. And it's like, oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So we definitely are going to get to that, but just the idea that you would be able to relate and be able to keep a 12-year-old in line, for one, I mean, not even talking about all the cultural differences, language barriers and all of that, but there's a big difference between 12 and 17. I don't know even siblings who are those ages that want to hang out with each other.
Correct. Yeah. And I wasn't going to spend my days just at home with a 12-year-old just watching TV, like if it was to do something like, hey, you want to go play soccer or go ice skating or whatever, like I am here to learn from you. You're here to learn from me. Let's do this. Like I could see that feasibly working, but it was not going to work in this scenario. And just the way that the household was set up, it just was doomed to fail from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with these first two host families and then finally moving to the third one, how long had you been on program before you finally got to the third one?
I got to the middle of March. So that's about 8 months.
Wow.
But I mean, I realize we've been talking about a lot of downers, and I want to emphasize that it has not been all that. Like I had such wonderful friends. I had such a wonderful life. And as the things with the host families deteriorated, I just created that life and nurtured that life outside the home. Like I did, I joined the theater troupe at school. I was traveling to see my friends in other parts of Germany and other parts of Bavaria. I had 2 fellow exchange students in my school who were wonderful. I went back to Paderborn to see my friends there and otherwise just like enjoyed being in this life. And it was like, okay, well, if the things at home, like I learned eventually I couldn't control for that. So just go enjoy your life in a way that you're
Mm-hmm.
going to enjoy to the extent that you can, and then go around. Like I don't, if it were not the best year of my life, I would not be here on a podcast with you.
That is fair. That is very fair, and keep that at the forefront too.
Yeah.
Are you ready to see the world and gain a global perspective?
With YFU USA, you can study abroad and immerse yourself in a new culture, language, and way of life.
It's more than just an adventure. It's a chance to grow academically and personally.
Start your journey today by visiting yfuusa.org and find out how you can study abroad with YFU USA.
Bye.
How did you go about nurturing these connections outside of the host family with your friends and with your classmates? How do you go about doing that?
I mean, finding things of mutual interest really, really helped, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the baseball team was a bunch of guys in mostly their early to mid 20s. There were a couple older than that. But once I signed up, they took me in as one of their own. And one is the topic of mutual interest really helped build a camaraderie. But also, I think the practices started in September. And for the first 7 months, they played this, and I'm not kidding, the most wackadoodle version of indoor baseball I've ever seen, where it was on a basketball court, but you would cut the court in half. And basically it was like kind of like human pinball almost, where a team would like toss the ball to their own batter, who would then run and then kind of be circling the bases as long as they could until there were 3 outs, and then it would switch. And then, that would continue for, I forget if there was a set number of innings or if it was like just a 17-minute limit. That was it. But so by the end, you've just been sprinting for a quarter of an hour, and then you rest for a quarter of an hour or half an hour and then do it again. And man, it was just the most fun thing I had ever thought of. And that group, of course, we would go out after practice, and, when the game started in the spring, we would, there would be long drives to games. So we would, and so the camaraderie that was built up there was tremendous. And also the camaraderie with other exchange students was just unparalleled, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I facilitate the orientations this year, I've told the students there that like all the people who are in your life during your exchange year, the only people who know what you're going through in the moment are the people around you, are the fellow exchange students around you. And, that sort of came to fruition or came to light at a couple of very specific points in the year. But, having a really good cadre of other exchange students who got it, who just understood what was going on, or what it's like to be away from home, and what it's like to be dealing with a host family that where you don't see eye to eye on everything. Like that was really, really something. And I loved having them around, and that was great.
Awesome. I'm trying to picture this indoor baseball and how this works.
It is. It is a tragedy that it has not caught on over here, because it is just something else. I mean, in Germany, the spring is very rainy and the winter is very long. So if you want to play baseball, you gotta get creative, and they have gotten creative. I miss it.
I'd love to see some footage of that. That would be so cool. And then the theater troupe you mentioned. So had you ever done theater before being on exchange?
I had taken a course in it in the 8th grade, and I think I had no, I had never done like a full length play, but I had been interested in it. And so, we had I officially had a class, but the class was basically to put on a show. And thanks to the vicissitudes of fate of having one of my YFU friends was from Norway, and she happened to be away the week that they were giving out the parts, so I got what would have been hers. It was great. I had like probably 10 lines in the whole thing. It was really fun. And we performed it we performed it in either March or April, but then we were invited to perform it for the town in front of the big church in the middle of town. So it was this open air courtyard with this beautiful, I think it's Baroque, but let's just say very beautiful church facade right behind us. And I think that was about 3 or 4 days before I left. And it's like, that was a way to go, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think of the logistics of trying to really dive into theater, for one, doing it in an entirely different language, and also, so grasping that, trying to grasp your lines, and then also acting on top of it. Props to you. I don't know many people who could have done that.
It was fun. It was very fun.
Amazing. It sounds like you had said if it's rainbow, sunshine, puppies, happiness with this third host family. So what about them made them such a great fit for you?
The short of it is that the relationship just worked. You know, it just clicked. Like there was a lot of mutual interest. So my host father was a teacher at my school. He was the teacher that was responsible for mentoring exchange students or advising exchange students. And his wife was a teacher somewhere else. I had 3 host sisters. They were 14, 12, and 10. And they didn't have the expectation that I would be their best friend, you know? And so we could engage like a 17-year-old engages with a 14, a 12, and a 10-year-old because, you know, we could, you know, like, oh, let's go out in the yard and kick the ball around. Or like there was a mini zoo up the hill. Let's go up there and see. Yeah. Or like, you know, it was the year Titanic came out. So like everybody was talking about that. And the World Cup was coming up and the Bundesliga season was winding down. So, you know, with the siblings, there was always a matter of interest, like something we could connect on, but they also didn't like expect me to, you know, be with them all the time. And that was really, really liberating. The parents too, one is they were so generous with their time and with their offering. And I think the fact that when I got to them, there was a little bit more than 4 months left. It just took a lot of the pressure off, right? Like, cause you're not trying to build for the year. It's like, okay, we'll go from March until July. But they just accepted me for who I was. And I didn't have to pretend to be someone else. I didn't have to run to, you know, see friends or anything, just because like I enjoyed being at home with them. Like my host mother was a history teacher and retroactively filled me in on so many of the things that I had seen. And, you know, she has this gift of, you know, not only telling you the facts of something, but connecting it to the present. Like, for example, the town that we lived in was the only Protestant town in this very Catholic area. And there's historical reasons that like they got basically like royal permission to be a Protestant town centuries ago. And that tradition has continued. But then she would tell me about like the counts of Ortenburg, the counts of the town who, you know, how they set up shop, why they did what they did, how this was able to persist, how it is reflected in the way the town looks. And it was just, that's the type of like, that those are my favorite subjects in school, but it was stuff that I was interested in learning, and she was offering it freely. You know, there was another time when my host dad was setting up a relationship between our school and a counterpart school in the Czech Republic. And while he was doing that arranging, my host mother and I took off to this town that this Marienbad is the German name. I think it's called Mariánske Lázně. I'm sorry, my Czech is not very good. I don't know if I pronounced it well, but it's a town in sort of like Western Bohemia that had this very spa-like, it had a history as a spa town where a lot of emperors and famous people had gone. And she hadn't been there and I hadn't been there. So it was like, oh, it's like 2 kids in a candy store walking around this little Czech town in the middle of basically nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, learning about its connection to the, you know, the Kaiser of Austria or something like that. And it was just like, it was connecting with someone over a topic of mutual interest. And, you know, they took me for me. And that was really the biggest gift they could have given me. I don't think I could have appreciated it in the moment, but I mean, I did appreciate it in the moment, but you know, I don't think I could have articulated it in the moment, just how unbothered I was. And to live your life basically unbothered, you know, is so wonderful. And of course, the springtime in exchange is when all of the things start to pick up, right? So I was like, there was more that was keeping me away from home, but I was like, but I actually don't want to be away from home as much as I was. So,
yeah. And you said that history was a big thing you connected with and that you're a history buff. I'm also a bit of a history nerd myself. I love history. So during your time on exchange, was there a certain period of German history that you found like really intriguing that you geeked out about with your host parents?
I mean, several. The one that comes to mind most is the 30 Years' War, because I should have known how big and important it was in German history, but by the time I got there. But you know, on that same trip to the Czech Republic, we stopped in the town where my host dad set up the relationship with the school. And my host mother was all giddy. It's like, oh, this is the house where Albrecht von Wallenstein was killed. And I was like, I'm going to pretend I know who that was. But he's like, he was a leader during the 30 Years' War. But also, when I happened to, by coincidence, meet up with a friend from home, who was traveling through Europe on a school vacation during April and invited me to come see them for a day. Like, hey, we're going to be in Ortenburg ob der Tauber tomorrow. Come see us. Like that kind of thing. My host mother sat me down and was like, okay, here's why this is special. Here's why this is big. Here's why it's a huge tourist magnet. And because the gist of it is that it survived the 30 Years' War. And the reasons for it, of course, go far into legend. But it was like connecting over that and then send off and then come back. Yeah,
that's
something
cool.
else. Yeah.
I mean, in Germany, what a great place for somebody who's such a history fan to go to. I mean, it sounds like you were able to visit a few of the historical sites. Were any favorites that stand out to you?
I mean, at the time, Berlin was a historical site, but it was also very much in transition, far more than it is today.
Yeah.
The city was, it was 8 years after the reunification. So everything was under construction. Everything. So there was just, so much to see and so much that hadn't been finished yet. Like when we visited, the Reichstag building where the Bundestag currently sits was still under construction. So, we got to see it from afar. The Brandenburg Gate was a thrill. There was the entire stretch of Unter den Linden, which is the main street of East Berlin that stretches east from the Brandenburg Gate. That was all something. The East Side Gallery, which is the longest stretch of the Berlin Wall that's still in existence, and it's a public art gallery, hence the name. That was a thrill. There's this one sculpture that stands on the west side of the Berlin Wall. It's called Der Rufer, which has been translated as the crier or the caller. And it's a guy standing. He kind of looks like the figure in the Scream painting, like the bald with the open mouth. And he has his hands cupped around his mouth, and he's just calling towards the other side of the wall. And I remember very specifically from my mid-year seminar in Berlin, our guide saying, that was put up to tell our countrymen on the other side of the wall that we haven't forgotten you. Now, I haven't heard, I've looked for that anecdote literally every time I've brought that thing into conversation, and I've not found it, but I still believe it. I remember it very clearly, and I choose to believe it. And I thought that was so poignant because it's such a small, in the grand scheme of things, small monument right in the middle of town, right in the middle of the street on a pedestal, just in defiance. And it was just so stunning.
Yeah. Chills thinking about that. And just, it's really that part of history in Germany is so fascinating to me. And the reunification, the rebuilding of it all, and being able to witness that firsthand. I can't imagine what that was like for you and for everybody there, but especially somebody who is pretty removed from it, coming into the culture and immersing yourself in it.
Yeah.
How was that? How was figuring all that out and rationalizing it?
I think that it's one thing that in hindsight makes a lot more sense than it did in the moment. Like in the moment, I was just very thrilled to be seeing, oh, this is East Berlin. This is where communism was. This is where, this part of the world that like my parents couldn't go to, or heck, I couldn't go to until, I was about 9 years old. Just the thrill of being there, like that was just something in the moment. And then I as I've thought about it in the years since, it's like, oh, we were there at a really interesting time. Not that everything is, not that any times aren't interesting, but a very unique time because, no places have been, there haven't been a lot of countries that have been torn in half for 50 years and that had to restitch themselves together and figure out how to do it. And we were there in the moment of the restitching, which is a very unique time. That's all.
Yeah. It's wild to think about. So kind of winding down on the exchange experiences, you had mentioned you went to the final host family in March, and then in July it was kind of time to head home and pack it all up. I mean, after going through this whirlwind of an exchange experience and then coming back home, how do you get back to normal after all of that?
I don't think you do get back to normal because your normal has been redefined. There was so I came back and had to do my senior year. Winding down was just very emotional, right? Because, and I think where the program now differs and from the way we had it was that the program now has as I understand it, has their Bundestag visit very much towards the end. Like I want to say it's towards the end of May or even the beginning of June. And then it's only about 2 weeks from there before they come home. Ours was the beginning of May, and then we didn't leave until the beginning of July. So we had a good 7 weeks to really sort of bask in this triumph, right? Of like, we had done this and we get it. And like, we speak German fluently and the weather is nice and we can go on these cheap train tickets and enjoy it. And there were, multiple school vacations during the middle of all this. I mean, so we had that real time to sort of sit and bask and enjoy the country, but also enjoy this world that we had built. And by that, I mean like these relationships with the family, with the friends, with my friends, and with the city and all that, to really sort of enjoy that and own it. As for the actual like act of coming back, like I don't really know what I expected, because I knew that I had gone through the biggest year of my life at that point. I also knew that I had to prepare for college on a lot faster timeline than the rest of my classmates. So that summer consisted of look at colleges, start applying, actually get my English back to a point where it could be tested. Because I had been speaking this portmanteau or this combination of English and German for a year, and was not really in the position where my English could have been, tested in the way that would get me into any school I wanted to go to. And so I had to do a lot of that studying pretty soon or pretty immediately. And then I had to, when I went back to senior year, I kind of expected it was going to be the same as the world I left. And I think several people had that expectation of me, but soon realized it wasn't. And so as I look back at senior year, I'm not quite surprised, but I notice how many of my friends, who was elevated and who sort of faded. I hung out with a lot of people I either hadn't known well or hadn't even met at all before I left. And I think it was just that like I had moved on and I had created this world that, yes, I wished I could have been back in Germany. I did go back to visit in April for vacation, but it was hard to be back for senior year, like knowing that there was a world of independence and all that I had once had that didn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And having to come to grips with, oh no, I got to play by the American rules, the American expectations. When I have been traveling for, 8 hours across the country, whatever, who cares? That was an adventure.
We talk so much about the transition of being on exchange. I don't think we really get the chance to talk a lot about that transition of being off and trying to get back to the new normal. And so was there anything that really helped you get back into the new swing of things?
Falling in with my friend groups again. And particularly the friends who accepted the changed me for who I was.
Yeah.
And yes, I talked about Germany too much, but it really helped sort of recenter me. And when I look at the year itself, what centered me was those friendships and those relationships. And when I was able to come back and do that, it was much, much, much better.
Yeah. The real exchange is the friends we made along the way. So then you finish up senior year, and what happened after that? It was university. I'm assuming you did get into one of the colleges you applied to.
I did.
Maybe a few.
I did. I went to Georgetown.
Okay.
I was a German major and I was a Russian minor, because those little forays into Eastern Europe from my host family, my appetite was whetted, and I wanted to know more about Eastern Europe. So, and when you want to study that, the most logical place to start is Russian. So I went to Georgetown here in DC. I studied those two languages. I studied abroad in St. Petersburg in Russia during the spring of my junior year. It was a very, very different experience, and learned a lot about Russia and about the former Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated in 2003, I didn't have a full-time job, so I looked to the place which was most logical, which was YFU. And as it happened, they had some basically summer travel. I think it was travel systems or travel assistance coordinator, something like that. It was coordinating travel for all the students who would come in and all the students who would leave. So from the office in Maryland, I would manage some on-site staff on the airport and basically like be the point person for like, oh, this flight's coming in late, or we need to get you a hotel. Here's what it is, all that stuff. And it happened to be at YFU that summer. One of my colleagues mentioned offhand, hey, have you heard of this firm, CBYX International? And I said, I have not. Which he said, well, one of our former colleagues just moved over there. Why don't you talk to her? Because I wanted to do something international. I just didn't know. And so I talked to this person, and lo and behold, they had a job opening on her team, interviewed, got it. I think she told me that, when they were considering candidates, they said, like, if he can handle the logistics for YFU, he can do basically any logistics that we need. And so I got this initial job sort of coordinating visits by foreign delegations in and out. And after about 5 years there, I went to business school and had these grand ideas of working either out in Silicon Valley or in Seattle or something like that. And then when I was close to graduation, I came back to DC and I was like, I don't want to be anywhere else. Like this is my town. Like, I grew up as an adult here, spent my college years here, and like, this is where I am. This is where my people are. So I came back, did some consulting work, and I'm here. I've worked several jobs. One thing I will say though, that as part of my business school experience, I met the friend who introduced me to my wife years later. So I can draw the line from my YFU year to working for YFU to CBYX to Duke to meeting my wife and having my daughter. So when I say that everything I have become because of this program, I can prove it. Like I can draw the direct line. And that's a reason why I'm so passionate about it, is because it has been, it was everything for me. And
Wow. I mean, I'm honestly kind of speechless. Like that's such a direct line.
And one anecdote that I'll add too is that we took when my now wife and I were first not first dating, but a year or so into dating, we decided to take a trip to Germany to see my host family and to show her, so I could show her where I lived. It was wonderful. We went for the Christmas markets. It was fantastic. 4 years later, by this time we're married, and she says, hey, I want to go back. And I was like, you do not have to sell me on that. So we are going to go back. But while we were there, she told me that she thought she was expecting, and we, lo and behold, proved it a couple of days later. So I found out 20 years to the date of my winter of discontent between the first two host families, that, in the same house, where I spent those few days with the local coordinator, because I stayed friends with the local coordinator. So I would stay with them when I went back.
Yeah.
We found out that our daughter was on the way. So that was a great way to really close the circle or broaden the circle, depending on how you want to look at it.
Wow.
Yeah.
My goodness. That's so cool. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And you were able to keep up these connections with these people you met in Germany. They were just fantastic. So your local coordinator, so like the host family, any of the friends that you made in Germany, were you able to still?
A bunch of the friends that I made, both the students and the Passauers. It's been it's a vibrant community. I try to get back more than I actually do get back. The last time I was there was about 3 years ago, but I'm hoping to get back soon. It used to be, I used to fly through Frankfurt a lot for work, so it was easier to sort of escape down for a day or two. But now I'll see what I can do. But I do miss it, and I love it.
Yeah. And how are you able to keep these connections up?
A lot of WhatsApp texts. WhatsApp texts. I mean, and obviously Christmas cards and everything, but like the like sharing of just like brief anecdotes of like, just to say, hi, I'm thinking of you, or I saw this, and can you help translate it, or like, am I understanding this correctly? Or just like, I want to, stop and say hi. So that's that.
That's wonderful. And then having now essentially your family be part of this too, and be part of this big, beautiful connection in this group of people that you fostered during your time as junior. That's amazing. With YFU too, you had talked about doing the travel coordinating, and I mean, if you can handle that, you can handle anything. That is an intense job. I give you all the credit in the world. What other ways have you stayed involved with YFU? When
I first came back, I did a little bit of volunteering around DC, which was like just like running events in schools, which is like, this is what the program is. So it was kind of minor outreach stuff like that. I was an area coordinator or an area rep for a couple of students here in the DC area. I did a phone screen, not a phone screen, like a host family screen once, just kind of like little jobs like that. I did, while I was in college for a summer, I taught that month-long orientation course the one that I had taken in a different part of Germany, in the north on the Baltic Sea in the former East Germany, which was fantastic. It was educational. And then for the last 2 years, I have helped facilitate the National Pre-Departure Orientation in a suburb of Chicago. So that's been very rewarding.
Yes. And that's for listeners. That's how I know Matt, is from being at these orientations with him. And I'm not doing any of the very important work. I'm just harassing people with a camera. And you had said it's really rewarding. What is it about being this an orientation facilitator that is so rewarding to you?
I've found that students who decide to do this have made a really big choice. It is a really big deal to go abroad. And I didn't really appreciate how big a deal it was when I was doing it. And so I want to be sure that they know and appreciate that, and that they embrace it because of that. I've also found that with exchange students, and particularly with alumni, the kinship is tremendous, because you've both done something that very few people have done. That, a lot of people think they know what an exchange student is, but very few have actually done it. So the kinship between people who have done it, where you can, like the stories I told about, navigating host families or like downtime or feeling alone, are, while some of the examples in my life are pretty extreme, like the feelings are not. The people who understand that really have a sort of connection, and you can always talk about anything. Like I have talked to CBYX students who are much older than me and who are much younger than me, and the questions are always the same. It's like, where did you live? Where did you go to school? What did you like this? What was your favorite parts? And like, because that no matter when this happened, those touch points are all very similar, and it's far more similar than people I went to high school with, or people who went to the same high school as me, or people who went to the same college or grad school as me. Like, it's something that not a lot of people do, and finding someone else who knows exactly what you've done. It's like, they have a window into you that other people don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And after being around the group of you facilitators during NPDO, I can absolutely second that you all are some of the most kind and caring people. You can just, the minute you walk into the room with all of the orientation facilitators, you can just feel that the passion that you all have for exchange and for helping to guide these students is palpable, powerful, and it's refreshing and recharging. And it's so great to know that these students and these future global ambassadors they're in such good hands and such capable hands. And
agreed.
I can't thank you enough for being being a facilitator. I know it can't be easy all the time, but I'm so grateful that they have the chance to talk to you and to be guided through this orientation experience with you and with the group of facilitators that we have.
It's an honor to do it.
To wrap it all up, it's kind of the consistency that I've noticed through this story. It's kind of like the analogy you mentioned at the beginning with waves. And it seems like there's just riding the waves of all of this, and it seems like a big crest up now, especially with your wife and your daughter here. So how do you keep riding that wave? How does this exchange experience help you to keep your head above the water?
Well, sometimes it's easier to keep your head above water than it is at other times.
Yeah.
I think that the word that I always come back to from my year is resilience, right? Like, it taught me to be resilient. It taught me to, it's not really applicable to my home life, but it taught me to stand up for myself, and I have seen the need to do that again and again and again. Like, when my first host family and I were really just about to break up, and I was like, I need to call my advisor, and they were like, no, you're not going to do that. I was like, yes, I am. I'm going to the payphone if I have to. I'm going to do it. That little bit of I'm taking control of the situation really helped me sort of, advocate for myself. And, I think that's really what YFU taught me to do more than anything, is to advocate for myself, to define who I wanted to be. Because if I wasn't going to do it for myself, somebody else was going to do it, maybe in writing. And that's really what I don't want to let anybody else do that for me. And so I will teach that to my daughter. Like, if you don't stand up for yourself, then it's very unlikely that someone else will consistently do it for you, That's what I learned when I was 16 and 17. particularly.
After this experience that you had with exchange and with the lows and the immense highs that you had from it, if your daughter comes to you one day and says, Dad, I want to study abroad, what are you going to say?
Well, I can't not let her do it.
I mean, yeah.
As someone who is an evangelist of it, I can't say no.
Yeah.
I would just want to be sure that her head's in the right place, that she doesn't just want to do it because I did it, that she wants to do it for her, and that she wants to do it for the right reasons. And there's a lot of right reasons. And if it is a decision that I have to make as a parent to let her do it, and yes, it would be hard for us, but I know the years upon years of rewards that I have gotten from it. I would send her off with the lessons that I have learned, but ultimately it's going to be her experience. It's going to be what she makes of it, and it's going to be what she wants to get out of it. And I can lead her in the right direction, but I can't do it for her.
Right.
It's up to her.
Yeah. She's got to write her own story, just like
Exactly.
you did. And to kind of sort of wrap things up, for one, what's next for you?
That's more of a loaded question now than it hadn't been. I mean, for the foreseeable future, I plan to remain as a freelance writer and business developer. I have several clients lined up, and I enjoy writing business proposals, hopefully for things international, but also for things domestic.
Yeah.
I want to get back to Germany soon. I trying to write some travel articles about parts of Germany that I have been to and that I have not been to, but I've find fascinating. And I find that Germany, because it's so decentralized, has a lot of really interesting stories from a lot of different places that are all very, very different.
Yeah.
And so I hope to get back to Germany and write some of that probably in the new year. We'll see, just, see where life takes us.
Yeah.
But that's it for now.
Okay. Awesome. And is there anywhere where if somebody would like to read some of your travel articles that people could find them?
Sure. My website is matthewburke.co.
Okay.
And my Instagram is mattburke_writer, or ask mattburke_writer.
All right. And we will make sure to keep that in the episode notes for people who want to keep up with your stories, or maybe ask for your point of view or advice, or ask a question about their future exchange, or a parent who has a kid who's going to study abroad. I think your perspective could be very helpful to somebody in those situations.
Anytime.
Thank you. Final question. I mean, we talked about so much, and there were so many memories, good and not so good, but is there one that really stands out to you as something that's special to you that we didn't get to touch on?
Yeah, it was the Bonn trip, the Bundestag visit at the end of the year, or was in May, so close to the end of the year. And what stands out about that is the feeling of absolute triumph that encapsulated this whole, I think it was 4 or 5 days in Bonn. We were, I think, the last group to actually see the Bundestag in Bonn before it moved back to Berlin. If not, we were the second to last. But my group had gathered for our mid-year seminar in February, and then 90 days later, reconvened in Bonn. And the difference between the two of them in terms of the tenor of one from being in the doldrums and despair of winter and past the holidays, and I'm not gonna, I don't know if I can make it and all that. And then like finding that camaraderie that's like, oh no, we're all in this together. Like that, we entered Berlin with a lot going on in our heads, and then sort of found that camaraderie. And then 3 months later, this feeling of just absolute triumph, not only being with the Bundestag, but being with each other, right? Like we had, our German had gotten loads better. Our knowledge of the country, our knowledge of each other, of ourselves, it had just grown so much. And that type of growth in 3 months was just stunning. And to just like live and revel in it and just be and to exist, and like to exist in triumph, like that. Like it would be hard to replicate that. And that's a real positive memory I have.
Yeah. Cresting the top of that mountain together, or that wave together. Yep. That's so great. And Matt, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story, sharing your advice, and sharing your resilience with me and with our audience. It has been such a pleasure talking to you and learning about your story, and it's been an absolute honor.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you for having me, Kelsey. I really appreciate it.
And that, dear listeners, is this episode of Life Exchange, Stories of Understanding. I've been your host, Kelsey Ross. Till next time, bye.
Listen to Life Exchange, Stories of Understanding now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.